Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Alternative Currencies and Circular Economy session, moderated by Georgina Gomez, Associate Professor, Institute of Social Studies, Erasmus University, with the participation of Susana Martin Belmonte, economist, author, collaborator at Open University of Catalonia, Dr. Paolo Dini, local currency developer, informal systems, Bruno Delepierre, Happonomy Coördinator, Stef Kuypers, Happonomy Researcher in Behavioral and Monetary Economics.
So, good afternoon. Welcome to the last panel of these 2 busy days. My name is Georgina Gomez. I'm an academic, in fact, at the Erasmus University Rotterdam. I've spent about 20 years of my life researching and working on complementary currencies, both as researcher but also as a bit of an activist in them. And at the moment, I'm the president of the Research Association on Monetary Innovation and Complementary Currency Systems, big name that stands for RAMIX.org, if you want. And I'm going to introduce first the panelists that will address on the topic of circular economy and complementary currencies. So the first speaker to my right is Bruno Delepierre from Belgium. He works at the crossroads of innovation, entrepreneurship, and policy. He started his career in the UN and created a digital company, so he saw the good, the bad, and the ugly of entrepreneurship. Nowadays, he coordinates the Belgian activities of the Global Entrepreneurship Network. He's a member of the Club of Rome and founder of Happonomy, a non-profit developing solutions for a regenerative economy. He will speak together with Stef Kuypers, who is a systems thinker. He started his career in IT. In 2006, he wanted a change and has been doing facilitation of creative processes, a master's in film and acting, a coaching training, and a leadership training. He got into monetary economics by wondering why it's so hard to solve our climate change problem. The third speaker will be Susana Martin Belmonte from Spain. He works for Revo, Prosperidad Sostenible, and is the coordinator of the Unlock campaign in Spain in association with Positive Money Europe since March 2022. Susana held different positions in NGOs working in projects related to monetary innovation, local currencies, and co-production of public policies such as the V-MINCOM and the Medtown projects. She is an economist and has a master's degree in economic theory. And the final speaker of the day, in fact, will be Paolo, who trained in the US as an aerospace engineer. He spent 20 years at LSE studying social science with a focus on sustainable development and 10 years studying monetary theory and local currencies. He is currently a researcher at Informal Systems, a crypto company committed to sustainability and the real economy. So those are going to be the speakers in this panel. First, I will take 1 minute to explain what are complementary currencies, because I suppose many of you are not familiar with this concept. They are usually a very local instrument. They tend not to scale up very well. But let's imagine I live in the Netherlands. I need to fix my bike all the time. Paolo, can you fix my bike? Yes. Thank you. As an aerospace engineer, I suppose you can fix a bicycle every now and then. So I have somebody that can fix my bike. I don't have money to pay you, but I'm sure we can arrange something. For example, Susana, can you cook? Susana will cook for you, Paolo. Paolo is useless cooking, but he can fix bikes. This is great. Now, I don't know, the two of you are computer scientists. I'm sure Susana has needs in terms of web design, whatever. Can you design a website? Good. Now, the problem is, what can I do for them? I will take care of your garden. Very good. So here we have a very tiny group of trusted persons. All we need is to decide on the unit of account. Is it okay, 1 hour? My hour is the same as your hour. All we need now is the means of payment. We can use a paper voucher. We can get, I haven't seen paper in this conference, but if we could find a block of paper somewhere, we can say 1 hour, half hour, yeah? This is what complementary currencies do. Of course, they work much better when we have a few hundred people. If it's in the thousands, they are effective for poverty alleviation and income generation. If it's in the hundreds, like time banking, they are very good to getting people to know each other. Now, what has this got to do with circular economy? Because I said the words trust, I said the words we found things that we need from each other, we could perhaps scale it to a level of closing circles of economic activity and production in such a way that we can reduce waste and not need to use euros at the same time. Yeah, this is the idea of mutual credit. Now, in order to explore this idea, each one of the speakers is going to speak for about 8 to 10 minutes, more or less, and then we go for questions. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. First of all, thanks for inviting us. It's a pleasure to be able to share our work here this afternoon. My name is Bruno Delepierre. As Georgina introduced me already, I'm going to skip that part. The smart cookies under you already understood that Happonomy is happiness and economy squeezed into one word. And we are a research and development center to look into how we can undo the social and ecological damage which is done today by our economic system, basically contributing to our regenerative economy. I was really happy to hear the word regenerative this morning, because from my perspective, it's the step beyond sustainability. How can we undo the damage, actually? Next to me is Stef Kuypers. He's a colleague of mine, our monetary systems expert. He's not my brother, you might think so. And you don't also have to be bald to join our organization. You may have to be bold, one letter difference, but it's a bit of a different story, of course. For the next 15 minutes, we'd like to explore 3 things, actually. First of all, what are we talking about? Circular economy. I want to share our experiences on the actual problem. Take a deeper look into what extent currencies can support the type of behavior that we're looking for. And finally, also share the story and the lessons of a pilot which we ran last year during 1 year in Belgium, and provide some suggestions from what we think could move the needle a bit further. So that's what we prepared for the first 15 minutes of this panel. And well, we are talking about circular, right? And what we've seen with, so today many organizations are in the business model of we produce something, we sell it, and then the consumer throws it away. And of course that creates strain on our natural resources. And that's where circular economy, say in the narrow sense, so not as Georgina described it in the circles, but really like focusing on reducing usage of natural resources, comes with a couple of strategies, right? That maybe some of you know the R strategies. It's rethinking your entire product so that you don't have to use your any natural resources anymore, that you either reduce it, that you reuse your existing products like secondhand clothing, for instance, that you recycle it into a new product, of course, that we repair the existing products that we have, so we just don't throw them away, or that we at least recover the energy. I'm glad I've remembered all 6 of them, because often I forget one of them and then I get stressed. Anyways, so that's the strategies which are presented from circular economic thinking. And what we've seen with many organizations is that people are very enthusiastic about that kind of thinking, but still they're not implementing those actual strategies. And that's the question, one of the questions that we're working on, like, why? And what can we do to achieve this? And what we've seen with so many people in organizations is today that they're experiencing increased stress just to keep the boat afloat, to make sure that organizations can continue, right? Because you have energy inflation, you have energy price hikes, you have inflation. So it's difficult to keep the organization steady as we go. But of course, that does not solve the problem. So the problem that we are looking into is how can we organize that sustainable change? And from our perspective, it's something that we want to put front and center in the entire discussion, actually, also on the financial level, is the fact that we behave in a certain way and we're not rational agents. As a famous behavioral economist said, we're predictably irrational. How we decide is pretty straightforward, right? We decide emotionally, we take shortcuts because we don't have the brain power to analyze everything, and we also sometimes struggle with objectively valuing or assessing value. So, especially when we are stressed, our type of decisions change, right? And that actually hinders our change towards a more circular economy. And then, of course, the good news is that we can actually design currencies that can support this sustainable circular behavior. And of course, what's very important there is which monetary system do we put behind that particular currency to get to the type of behavior and the type of choices that we all aspire for. And I'll give the mic now to Stef, who can go a bit more in depth on that.
Okay. It's been mentioned already a couple of times before today. Like we live in a system that actually forces us to make the wrong decisions. What I want to do here is put this approach from a little bit of a technical point of view. I'll keep it brief and short because I could go on about this for about 3 hours, but I won't do that. It is true that the way monetary systems are designed influence our behavior on a level that we might somehow feel it, but it's really hard to put our finger in it. It's part of my research is trying to put the finger on where does it happen. The current monetary system, and if you take it down to the core, money is created by loans, and money is destroyed when you pay back the loan. The interest on the loan is profit for the bank. So the balance, the total available amount of money is the loans minus payoff of the debt, and that determines how much money is in your economy. That means that debt is a constant in your economy, and debt creates stress. Who of you really loves to be in debt? I don't see any hands. So I believe that being in debt is not something that we actually enjoy. Being in debt creates financial stress, and when that financial stress becomes too dominant, then it actually influences our behavior in a couple of negative ways. There's been research that's been done on when people operate from a point of scarcity, which financial stress does create. It eliminates our long-term thinking, and it creates tunnel vision, and it lowers your IQ by about 13 points. So we're actually living with a system that has that properties. It also has a couple of systemic properties, and that is, this is where it gets a little bit technical. The growth of your money stock, which is your total available money, it's a percentage, must be greater than the net profit accumulation of your banks. If that does not happen, if your profit accumulation by your banks is greater than the growth of your total money stock, your debt ratio, which is the total amount of bank debt divided by the total amount of available money, grows exponentially. The thing you could do is keep an eye on the M2 in the economy, and if it does not grow sufficiently, then unless, of course, it's increased again, then a debt crisis occurs. Look at the pandemic. The ECB has created 7,200 billion euros during the pandemic to keep the money stock growing. We can design systems that actually alleviate financial stress and that have incentives to push us towards long-term thinking. At Happonomy, we created one such system, which pushes us towards better choices for the long term. The way it works is very simple. You create money to give everyone a guaranteed income. By doing that, you actually alleviate financial stress because you create financial security for every living person on the planet. And then you destroy money because a monetary system needs a creation and a destruction mechanism. You destroy money by charging demurrage, which is a negative interest, and taking that from the balance. This creates a monetary system that has the following systemic properties. Your money stock is calculable and stable. The fluctuation you see is because it's a simulation, and there are a couple of rounding errors, but as you can see on the money stock, it's less than 1. When you have a structural quantitative easing, or the government's printing money for a large transition project, your money stock just moves towards a new equilibrium. The same if you have a structural quantitative tightening or a trade deficit, your money stock again moves to a new equilibrium. It's bounded. It remains calculable and bounded. And these are some qualities that actually allow us to really fund necessary expensive structural projects, and it even influences our behavior, which Bruno will tell you more about.
Thank you. Yeah, from the technical explanation of Stef, the most important thing to take away is that today we operate in an unstable system, and it creates stress, which drives the types of behavior that we're seeing today. And as Stef indicated, we can actually redesign that and apply principles to new currencies to support sustainable and circular behavior. And what we've done last year is we piloted a system which takes these properties to heart. And we installed, together with 3 other organizations, it was with West, which is an applied university, Fairfin, an organization focusing on fair finance, and Munt Uit, which is the Belgian center for, Flemish center, an expert center on community currencies. We've installed a complementary currency next to the euro in a Belgian town. We had a couple of talks with different towns, and eventually we ended up in a place called Lichtervelde. Why? Because they already had this community-based complementary currency in place, so we could build on that actual idea. And what we've done is that, or at least that was our intention, we wanted to give 100 persons an income guarantee of 16 clovers. That was the name of their complementary currency. Apply the system which Stef just described, and using the excess money, use the money like the tax, using it to support local initiatives, like local social and ecological initiatives, because that was our goal, to see to what extent we could support the local economy and at the same time strengthen social and ecological goals. We had a euro backing of 30,000 euros next to those clovers, just to minimize the risk. That was key in our approach. And it was in full Corona, so that was a bit of a difficulty, of course. We were able to create quite some enthusiasm for the project. 80% of the people who attended our initial meetups said, "Yeah, we want to be involved. We want to even partake." And then so we started trying to distribute the basic income, and we failed. Because people were quite reluctant. They didn't believe us, even though this was a project of the European Social Fund, so all good. People did not believe that it was possible to receive free money. That's something we didn't expect, of course. We also noticed quite some fear with the commercial actors. We guaranteed them that they could have an exchange into euros one by one, so there was no risk to our perception. But still, they were so stressed that they demanded to be able to exchange the money earlier than the end of the project time. So we obviously did so, because otherwise the project would have probably crashed. With the city body, with the mayor and with the alderman who is responsible for economics, we also noticed quite some reluctance. In the end, Georgina's laughing. In the end, we were able to inject about 15,500 clovers into the local economy. There were 14 commercial actors participating and about 160 citizens. And yeah, obviously some people got a guaranteed income, others didn't. You could buy into the system as well if you wanted, like €1 for 1 clover, you can invest in that. And what we saw was that people obviously were quite happy with the basic income, right? They were like, oh, that's nice. They didn't hear of it, so we were surprised that we thought this was something more or less mainstream, but no. So yeah, there was still a lot of explanation to be done, but they liked it, and they used it mainly to go to bars, to a supermarket, like a local vegetable shop. So it actually contributed to this local, economy as such. Through the system, we were also able to devote 600 clovers, which we changed to euros actually, to this social initiative to support schools who had to feed children who did not have, bread in their bread box. So, although on the size it was relatively limited, we were able to prove conceptually that the system actually works. Key lesson is, let's not underestimate the change of fear of change, by people. We can design, the good thing is that we can design the actual implementation process. We made some mistakes, for sure. We learned from it, that's life. If you want to introduce a complementary currency, you can do it bottom up, of course, like with citizens, but it has its limitations. So if you are able to bring on board the city, it's definitely a plus. And keep the story, right? Because if you're telling a positive story of local change and the story where economics supports the things that we want, like value, and not go into this panic mode, like I'm going to lose my money, then you obviously will be able to catalyze change much more quickly. I want to round up with 4, let's say, things where we think we can move the needle towards a circular economy and a sustainable economy. The first part is, and that may sound a bit strange because we're talking alternative currencies, but we can regenerate throughout the euro, build more resilient organizations, transform business models, and even work within the euro system to undo that damage. We still need to further explore the, like on a scientific level and a more exact level, which behavior we trigger in our current capitalist system. There's a lot of things to be looked into still. If you're able, get an alternative currency next to the euro in your town. It's a first step towards a more gradual change. And also for those in the room maybe who have links to the ECB and the EU policymakers, we can work together to build a more sustainable, digitally driven euro. So a lot of nice things ahead. That's what we had. I'll pass the mic now to Susana.
Thank you. Okay, back. Hi, thank you for inviting me to this panel. Thank you, Georgina, for thinking of me and the experiences that I have been working on. First of all, I would like, before I start with the presentation, I would like to make a little comment about our situation right now, our challenge as a species, which is to stop climate change. So I think this is important because we're talking about abundance. In circular economy, we're talking about making the most of the resources that we have. But we also have to bear in mind that we need a cap on emissions, and a sharp cap on emissions, because we are working a lot in the regulation to increase efficiency of our systems. And that is very important and needed. But once you have the efficiency, you need to really cap the emissions. Otherwise, you will have the rebound effect that we all know, and you won't be able to face this challenge that we are all facing. So enough of the cap, and I'm going to explain our experience in Spain with complementary currencies that we've put in place. So, well, Georgina has already, oh my God, this is really not showing the way it should. Okay, so this is a little bit the kind of complementary currencies that we have. We have local currencies that are backed with euros, a little bit like the Happonomy experience. We have mutual credit, which is a little bit what Georgina explained, which is putting in value your resources to exchange to get a monetary unit that the community backs and be able to get the goods and services that you need from the community as well. And you can do this on a entrepreneurial level, or you can do this from an individual level, which is the LEDs and time banks. And also, of course, you have the cryptocurrencies, which is not really a category in itself, but it's such an important tool and such that is getting so much attention that we have to address this type separately. Okay, so this is a tip. I'm going to speak about a kind of circularity that we have. We can tap on with complementary currencies. This is the case for a local currency, and this is also something that is not new at all. This was discovered by Keynes and Kaleski in the 30s of the 20th century, which is the monetary multiplier. So what we see is that €1 spent in the local business is a euro that has 0.45 possibilities to recirculate locally. If you spend a euro in a corporate chain, you have 0.15 possibilities that it will be spent locally. And if you spend a euro in an online shop, you have practically 0 options that this euro will recirculate in the local economy. And this is what Keynes and Kaleski discovered. There's a multiplier effect, and there is, of course, a multiplier effect of public spending. So when you spend in the local economy and you make a condition that this expenditure has to be respent locally, this is very powerful. It can turn subsidy that is for one individual into a subsidy for the whole community. So this is what we did with the experience of REC, Barcelona, Real Economic Currency. We did it in association with the municipality of Barcelona in the Urban Innovative Actions project, and it was called BEM income because it was a guaranteed minimum income that where the city council was given to 1,000 families. Half of them had the condition that they had to re-spend locally at 25% of this guaranteed minimum income. So it was digital, based on the blockchain, and we showed our conclusions in this paper. Basically, what we saw, sorry, it's cut. I don't know why it's showing so badly, but it looked fine when I delivered it. So what we saw is that there was this cash transfer really given to the people. It was perfectly able to solve the basic needs of the person. So we had like 80 businesses in the northeast of Barcelona area, and when we started operating, the number increased to 160. So the local businesses initially they were reluctant also to accept the local currency, but not a few of them, only 80. It was a good number accepted it. Of course, it was key that the city council was behind the project. And then the number increased quickly as soon as they realized that their other competitors were getting this income stream that they wouldn't get otherwise. So they started to use it, and the beneficiaries were totally happy with spending into the community. A lot of them were very aware of the power they had as a consumer, of the fact that they were helping the community, and they were happy to do that. And so the acceptance of the beneficiaries was 92%, were satisfied or very satisfied. Among the businesses, it was 88%, the acceptance of being satisfied or very satisfied. There was a local multiplier effect of 2.11. So in only 13 months, which is, we think, quite substantial. And there was a recirculation rate that was increasing because, of course, we were promoting the recirculation of the currency. We were inviting local businesses to tell us which of their suppliers were located locally, so we could invite them into the system. And by doing this, we got this recirculation rate. So basically, this is what happened. This experience started in 2018, and still the system is still working. Is now used for a different purpose, to promote cultural goods, because the guaranteed minimum income was not a project that finally got to be approved in itself by the City Council of Barcelona. It won the Blockchain for Social Good 2020 prize, and from the European Commission. And yeah, so I'm gonna be, wrapping up this is so the circular economy, how complementary currencies contribute to the circular economy. I'm gonna make a summary here. First of all, they foster reuse and repair, because when you are locally working in the community, you can have very easily services of repair, so you can extend the lifespan of products. You can reuse, because it's very usual that local currencies and complementary currencies are used in markets, informal markets, in which people exchange whatever they have. And so you can foster this reuse of goods that are underused. Then we have the kind of increase in local consumption, which is the benefit that we were seeking with the REC Barcelona. This has an effect of CO2 footprint reduction, because when you're consuming local products, you are saving all the fossil fuels that are needed to bring long distance products from far away. Then you have the networking effect, that the people participating in these community currencies are normally connected to initiatives in the sense of sustainability, etc. So this is like a network that is created among them, in which this knowledge of new initiatives can be explained and distributed. And of course, there's, as very well Stef explained, these currencies are not created with interest, so they are based in credit, but they're not based on interest-bearing credit, so they don't involve any monetary growth imperative into the economy. And that's everything I had to say. Thank you very much. I pass it on to Paolo.
Test. Okay, can you go back one? Okay, so I'm going to read mine because time is limited. My talk is about collaborative finance for sustainability. Next. Yes. To understand what that means, we begin by recognizing that money can be understood in two different ways, either as a social relation of credit and debt, or as a commodity or asset. In the first case, it works best as a unit of account. In the second, it supports all three functions of money: unit of account, medium of exchange, and store of value. In this talk, I focus more on the first. Yeah. A good example of money as a social relation is provided by mutual credit, where the credits are issued by a participant in a mutual credit circuit by going into debt by the same amount as the amount issued. In other words, mutual credit distributes the power to create money to the circuit members. A consequence of this creation mechanism is that when a member with a positive balance buys from a member with a negative balance, the money used to pay is destroyed. Therefore, mutual credit is a circular currency. It is created, spent, destroyed, created again, and so forth. Excellent. How big is Sardex? This diagram shows that about 28 million euros were spent on the island of Sardinia in 6 different business sectors, with retail and services being the largest. Next. Over time, we can see that in 2017, Sardex had about 2,800 members, which is the orange curve on the left there. The yellow curve is the employees who agreed to receive part of their salaries in credits. The transaction volume shows about 28 million for 2017, and the B2E volume is the sum of employee salaries plus what they spent with those credits. This is nice, but it has a pretty small macroeconomic impact. We're talking about fractions of 1% of Sardinian GDP. Next. Multilateral trade credit set-off, or NTCS, is another example of a collaborative finance service. And on the other hand, it can have a pretty large impact. NTCS is an algorithm that looks for closed cycles of invoices in an obligation network and subtracts the smallest amount from each cycle. An obligation network is a set of bilateral debts, or invoices, if you will, between end counterparties. So how does it work? For example, if I owe you 100 and you owe me 50, we talk about it, I just pay you 50 and we're done. MTCS generalizes this to 3 or more nodes. So, for example, in this cycle, we can subtract the smallest amount of 20 units without affecting the net positions of the firms involved. A was at -10 before set-off and is still at -10 after set-off, and so forth. Therefore, set-off can be performed without the use of any liquidity. It simply decreases the debt burden across the network. It decreases the size of the balance sheets of the affected companies, and therefore the individual and overall risk of the network. How large an effect is this? Next. We performed a simulation with Sardex data, meaning that we took the transaction data from May 2019 and pretended it was invoices that had not been paid yet. This shows 12,302 invoices between approximately 3,200 companies. These are shown as dots on this diagram, and I'm not sure if you can see them. How many cycles were there? How much could be set off? Next. The answer is about 5,600, or 45% of the invoices were actually in cycles, involving a bit more than 1/3 of all the companies. The cycles can be fairly long and complex, as shown in this visualization, the blue one and the red one. They can also overlap, which is shown by the green bridge between them. Next, please. The volume for May 2019 was about 2.8 million euro, of which about 690K were set off, or about 25%. So that's fairly significant. Next. Depending on how closed or open an economy is, this number can change quite a lot, as shown in this figure. For example, in a Kenyan village, most of the trades are internal to the village. It is a fairly closed economy. In this case, the amount set off is about 80% of total debt, where total debt is just the sum of all of the invoices. For the Sardex economy, we saw that it's about 25%. And for a data set of 35,000 Italian companies, it was about 8% for that particular data set. Now that corresponds to about 8 million euros cleared without liquidity in 1 month. If we multiply that by 12, that's 1.2 billion. And given that there are about 3 million SMEs in Italy, we could multiply this by 100, 35,000 by 100 is 3.5 million. If you multiply that by 100, we're talking about 120 billion, which can be cleared if all the companies in Italy were participating. That's about 6% of Italian GDP, roughly. So I think that's pretty big, potentially. These two empirical case studies are examples of collaborative finance because some level of mutual trust and collaboration is needed to unlock economic value that would have remained out of the reach of selfish, rational agents maximizing their own individual utility. Next. Let's now take a step back after these empirical examples and see the theoretical implications. The main one, in my opinion, is that money is not a neutral instrument. According to neoclassical economics, money is neutral because an increase in monetary mass affects only prices without influencing real economy output. But money does not affect only economic factors, it also affects the lives of people, meaning that whether it is neutral or not depends in part on the subjective disciplinary point of view. But if we include also money creation by banks, then the decision of whether or not to issue a loan does not affect only the lives of people, it also affects the real economy. So I think it's fair to say that money is not neutral on a fairly objective basis. Next. The consequence of the non-neutrality of money is that depending on the design of the monetary instrument, different kinds of finance and economies will be supported. In each case, themselves being supported by different mathematical theories. For example, money as a commodity is effective at supporting extractive finance, which is consistent with neoclassical economics and is underpinned by game theory. By contrast, money as a social relation is the best kind of instrument to support collaborative finance, or CoFi, which is compatible with the view of economic anthropology, which in turn views the economy as composed of 4 domains of value: market, capital, social relationships, and the commons. This means that social relationships and the commons are not outside the economy. They are important centers of value creation on par with market and capital. And I believe that this has been demonstrated fairly clearly by the open source movement over the past 35 years. This framework is underpinned by graph theory. Now, clearly, we can't just dispose of investment capital, which is essential to entrepreneurship, and we definitely need to support working capital and the circular economy. Therefore, we need a sustainable synthesis between these two different ways of organizing our economic, financial, and monetary systems. Next. This final slide shows how the economy of economic anthropology, where you can see the 4 domains, the pink one is the capital, the yellow one is the market, the blue is the social relationships, and the green is the commons, can be arranged in increasing order of abstraction of value along the y-axis and in terms of scale from local to global along the x-axis. In this depiction, money as a social relation is most effective in the lower left part of the figure, whereas money as a commodity is dominant in the upper right. Now, I'm not sure how well you can see this from where you're sitting, but I tried to show a hoovering effect, a suction, a vacuum coming from financial capital that is depleting the other domains of value and is actually destroying our social lives and environment. Mutual credit can act as a protective barrier against this suction as long as it is non-convertible. In other words, as long as it's not securitizable, as long as you can't speculate against it, as long as it cannot leak away towards the financial centers and so forth. Whereas MTCS promises to act as a bridge. How does that work? Well, the reason is that MTCS acts on the unit of account. Therefore, it doesn't care if the money is a social relation or a commodity. It's going to be able to clear it the same way. So it's an extremely nice instrument because it can actually connect these two otherwise somewhat incompatible domains. However, MTCS still relies on collaboration and a fairly high level of trust for companies to disclose their debts and so forth. And so it provides an example for how things can improve by accessing the type of value that neoclassical economics and game theory and so forth cannot even see. So another way to say this is that we have more or less understood how to tackle the lower boundary of Kate Raworth's donut that Piotr showed us yesterday morning. But we're still struggling with the upper boundary, i.e. how to access the power of capitalism in a sustainable way. So in other words, if you get too close to it, you get sucked in like a black hole and you can't get out anymore. So we need to understand how to make use of investment capital without falling into the depletion of society and the environment. So my final punchline here is that clearly greater monetary literacy is needed.
We are passing microphones. There are enough microphones, we are just passing them. Huh? Thank you very much for listening to us. We have a few minutes left for some questions. I would like to encourage people to please ask, so it's a little bit more dynamic. But I will ask the first question, and that is, what is this financial literacy? What sort of education would we need to get people there? So I would ask this question first to you and to Paolo, because you wrote it in your slide.
I'm going to take this mic. Yeah. I was in a discussion a couple of weeks ago with a committee of the Flemish government to discuss the profile of the next generation economics student. And the discussions which we had was the fact that they all needed to be system changers and visionaries and like all the topics which we feel that socially and ecologically are important. What struck me was the fact that the behavioral lens, like the psychological, biological, neuroscience lens, was not embedded in the initial proposal. So I'm glad that we were able to at least advocate to look into, let's say, a bit more open, non-exact way of thinking about economics and at least reflect on that. And what I was also advocating, to my very surprise, was that we still need to learn the hard basics of economics. We still need to know how to organize, we still need to know how to finance, how to market, that we cannot forget the mechanics of economics in our discussion on sustainability. So those were the two things that we had an interesting talk about.
Hello? Yes. So I guess my own history could be an example. I discovered the existence of the concept of a complementary currency in 2005 when I met Michael Linton and he talked to me about the LETS system that I think you mentioned. I realized I had no idea what this was about. I said, you know, I had, as an engineer, I was used to a reference frame or like a theoretical reference, you know, some sort of framework that I can rely upon. And I realized I don't know where to start looking for making sense of this. So that was 18 years ago. So it's taken that long for me to feel that I have some idea now of where money comes from, what it is, and what it can be used for. So this is not easy. And partly it's because I believe we have centuries of inertia, cultural inertia, where money was basically just something that the powerful had, the king, you know, the central bank or whatever. So I think that the complementary currencies are wonderful instruments for learning about money, for thinking about money on your own terms, in a different way, for asking questions. I think that they can also be effective economically, but I think an integrated approach at both practice and ideas and theory needs to be somehow promoted. I would say starting from secondary school. I wouldn't wait until university.
Thank you. Thank you. There is a question in the audience, and I will repeat it for the people who are online.
skills. And they're not the same, because some are appreciative in use, others are depreciative in use. And also personal relationships and skills cannot be transferred, so not accumulated indefinitely. And I've seen those notions of social capital and trust and so on in your presentations, and all of you talked about that. And I would just like to hear your view, and I don't know who wants to take that question, on the difference between different types of capital and currency. It's not the same, right?
Okay, I said I was going to repeat the question for online, but I'm not sure if I'm capable. But the gist of the question is the difference between money and capital. Part of the criteria for this distinction is some depreciate, some accumulate, some cannot be transferred, some can, and I hope that's enough for the people online, and the answer is clarifying enough.
Okay, I'm going to give it a shot. Imagine you want to build a house. If you got skilled people that can build a house, you got the material and you've got the ground, then you've got everything you need to build a house. There's no money needed. What happens though in our society is the house will not get built because there's no money. And it's as Paolo said, money is a social construct. We adapted money in our society as an easy means to trade with each other. It's also a vehicle of trust, because if you go to the baker and you say like, okay, I'm hungry, I would like to have a bread, why doesn't the baker just give you the bread? Because the baker is not certain that if he gives you the bread, he will get something in return from somewhere else. But if you pay him with money, he knows that other people trust the money, so he will get real capital for the money that he has. So the way I see it, money is a way to acquire capital and to trade capital, but it is not capital. Does that kind of answer your question, or?
Let's give it another try, Susana.
No, I think Stef is right. I mean, that's what production capital is. Social capital is something else. It's something that you can't really build with money. It's something that you build with trust, with community, with networking. So I mean, there is no. I think it's not a linear relationship between money and capital. Capital are theoretically means of production. That's what capital is what you use to produce output. But of course, all these other kinds of capital are totally different, and they're not so easily built with money, any kind of money, actually. That's what I think.
Can I also give it a shot? While we're at it. From my perspective, money is obviously the tool for creating financial capital in the system in which we have created as it is today. And unfortunately, and that's what we've been trying to convey, is that the way we have created the mechanism to create and financial capital actually negatively, it's a nuanced discussion, negatively impacts our social capital and impacts the ecological capital which we want and need. So to that extent, they have this influence one amongst another. And again, the question then is, do we need the system in which we operate today to achieve what we want? And I think that's the kind of interaction that we have today.
And I will add my little postscriptum, and that is that you cannot monetize all capitals. And perhaps that helps you understand the difference. You cannot monetize what some people call social capital, spiritual capital, etc. You can, by monetize I mean exchange it, put a price, etc. You cannot really put the value of loving your children. Yeah, so if you could do that, you would be monetizing. And that's also one of the things that complementary currencies that rely on trust can do, because you can get to know you know, I ate your bread. I ate the bread and the meals that you made. I ate your vegetables that you made yourself in your garden. So I got to know the value of you as a human being, but not your price in money. Thank you. There's a question in the tablet. Could money be only just a tool as the times passed? And is it just an expression of how much my time cost? Is it a tool, Paolo? I think you should not touch it. So.
Hello? Yes. Yes, I think of money as an instrument. It's a social technology. That's how I think of it. Now, what it stands for and the effects that it has depend on how the people using it agree to define it and use it. As Stef said, it's a social construct. So the problem, I think, is that in most cases, this type of definition and consensus has not been explicitly discussed. We simply received certain notion about what money is. And I remember for most of my life wondering, where is it coming from? You know, what is this thing? You know, it's obviously here now, but where does it come from? Well, I understood less than 10 years ago where it came from. So anyway, does that answer the question? I'm not sure.
You've been baptized.
Just following up on what Paolo was saying, I think it's important to mention that in 2014, 2017, both the Bank of England and the Bundesbank published some articles explaining what money in modern economy is, and this settled up a little bit what the central banks think about money, how it's created, because they are the ones who do it. So, and they said that money is created on loans, on lending, bank lending, and that's how it works. Although there are other theories still alive, which is amazing. It's not a self. It's a our discipline of economy is very, I think, not very well regarded because of this disregard of what reality is and lack of self-correction.
Yeah, I'd like to add to that, because questions can only be used as purely as a tool. Yes, but we have to keep in mind that the way money is designed, and there's actually a couple of things you need to look at. It's how is it created, how is it destroyed, and what other system properties are added that influence the flow of the money through your economy. Those will have an influence on how people use money. It will have an influence on the decisions we make. It will have an influence on how we interact with others around money. To give a very small example, they did research on human behavior after we handle money, the money in our current monetary system. And they discovered that after handling money, people are less willing to share and less willing to help others. And this type of behavior started from the age of 3. That means that the behavior of parents around money is transferred to the behavior of children at the age of 3. We really need to keep this in mind, that money is a very, don't get me wrong, money is a very interesting tool, and it can really help our society, and it can facilitate a lot of things. But you really need to think about the behavioral aspects of the monetary systems that we use.
For me, money is math with emotions. It's a number where we feel things. Let that sink in a bit. It sounds so simple that it almost like it's not true. And the emotions which we experience create the kind of behavior and results that we end up in today. So if we want to use it only as a tool, we need to be conscious about the emotions that surround it, and obviously choose which ones we prefer most. I'll leave that up to you, whether you prefer negative emotions or positive emotions. Everybody can choose by him or herself. And it facilitates this reduction of fear maybe for each other, like the negative emotions. So it facilitates connection, even though we don't understand each other or even not maybe necessarily like each other sometimes. But it's a very useful tool. So that's first part to the question. And the second part, I think, is something very actual today. It's the link between the investment of our time and money. It's the entire idea that we need to invest our time to receive money in return. And we're today in an age where, thanks to technology, actually, that paradigm is potentially shifting. And we can feel quite stressed about that, right? AI is going to take my job, ChatGPT is my new boss, that kind of thinking. Or we can be enthusiastic about it. It's the same story with a different emotion around it. And again, I would strongly advocate, that's why the logo of our entire organization is a smiley, to be positive about the change that we are experiencing and see the potential that we have. So I would strongly advocate that we disconnect our time and the receipt of financial security, at least, so that we can build a more sustainable and meaningful life.
Okay, I close with that. Coming to an end, thanks very much for having invited us. We managed to present a relatively coherent panel despite the many disagreements that we have among us. And thank you once again on behalf of all of us.